April 18, 1944, 23,000 feet above northern France. The sky was chaos. Flak bursts bloomed like black flowers, shaking Lieutenant Robert Bobby Prescott's P-51 Mustang. Below, France stretched endlessly, a patchwork of farmlands, rivers, and small villages under the shadow of German occupation. Above, sunlight fractured across the wings of enemy fighters diving from the clouds. "Eagle 2, break right," his wingman shouted. Prescott jerked the stick, G-forces crushing him into the seat as tracers ripped past the canopy. His engine screamed, then coughed. A plume of oil splattered the windscreen. The gauges spiked red. He was losing power fast. "Mayday! This is Eagle 2! Engine hit, going down south of Rouen!" The radio dissolved into static. Flames licked the nose of his plane. He unbuckled, yanked the canopy, and jumped. The world exploded into cold silence. Wind howled past his ears until the chute snapped open, jerking him hard. His Mustang spiraled below, smashing into a field in a burst of fire and debris. He hit the ground moments later, cutting the parachute free and rolling into a ditch. Distant trucks rumbled toward the crash site. German voices barked orders. Prescott stayed low, mud in his mouth, breath shallow. When the soldiers laughed and fired into the wreck for sport, he realized just how far behind enemy lines he was. Hours passed. He moved through hedgerows and farmland, careful not to leave tracks. By midnight, exhaustion and cold gnawed at him. That's when he saw the glow, orange light flickering beyond the trees. He crept closer, expecting a farmhouse. Instead, he saw hangars, guard towers, floodlights, a Luftwaffe airfield. Dozens of planes lined the runway, their silhouettes sharp against the mist. Messerschmitts, Focke-Wulfs, fuel trucks, and mechanics working beneath the glare. It was madness even to be near it. Yet amid the chaos, he saw opportunity. The base was alive, loud, full of moving shadows. A man could disappear in that noise. He stripped the insignia from a discarded German jacket, rubbed dirt on his face, and waited until the guard rotation shifted. Then he crawled through a drainage trench beneath the fence. Inside, his heart pounded so hard it hurt. He grabbed a clipboard from a tool cart, walking quickly, head down, pretending to belong. A mechanic shouted something. Prescott nodded, replying, "Ja, Herr Leutnant," in the best German accent he could fake. He reached a hangar filled with half-repaired fighters. Then his eyes caught one, an FW-190, clean, armed, canopy closed, fully fueled, ready for flight. The thought struck like lightning. It was suicide, but so was walking to the coast. He waited for silence, then whispered to himself, "All right, Bobby. Let's see if you can fly home in enemy colours." Airfield near Rouen, France, 1:47 a.m. The hangar was silent now, except for the soft tick of cooling engines and the distant hum of generators. Prescott crouched beside the sleek Focke-Wulf 190A-8, running his fingers along its cold metal skin. The black cross painted on the fuselage glimmered under the moonlight. Every sense screamed danger, but one thought pulsed louder than fear. This machine could get him home. He scanned the runway through the hangar slit. A single guard walked his route, 50 meters away, turning every 20 seconds. The others were gone, sleeping or drinking. Prescott counted the guard's steps, then moved. He climbed onto the wing, boots barely making a sound. The cockpit canopy was latched but not locked. He lifted it carefully, just enough to slip inside. The seat was tight, built for a German pilot's frame. Everything around him was labelled in German, Kraftstoffpumpe, Öldruck, Zündung. But he remembered enough from intelligence briefings back in England. He'd studied captured manuals, memorised every essential control. He flipped the switches one by one. Main power, on. Fuel pump, on. Magnetos, both. The gauges flickered to life. The aircraft seemed to awaken, a living beast waiting for breath. Prescott hesitated. Starting the engine would wake the entire base, but there was no turning back. He pressed the starter. The propeller spun once, twice, then thundered to life. The roar split the silence like a gunshot. Dogs barked, men shouted, floodlights flared across the field. "Come on!" Prescott slammed the throttle forward. The Focke-Wulf lurched ahead, tires squealing on the tarmac. A spotlight swept across the canopy. Bullets cracked against the fuselage. He ducked, teeth gritted, as the aircraft picked up speed. He reached takeoff velocity, pulled the stick back. The plane lifted off the runway just as tracer fire tore through the night below him. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He was airborne, in a German fighter. The airbase shrank beneath him, glowing with chaos. Searchlights clawed the sky, chasing his silhouette as flak erupted in bright white bursts. Prescott banked hard, heading west. His hands shook on the controls. The engine roared steady, stronger than he expected. Below him, rivers shimmered silver under moonlight, the French countryside stretching endlessly toward the horizon. He'd done the impossible, but he wasn't safe yet. 10 minutes later, dark bursts exploded ahead, German flak batteries along the Seine. Shells detonated so close he could see the glowing fragments. He dove, skimming treetops. Shrapnel ripped across the wing, punching holes in the metal. Smoke trailed behind him, but the plane held. "Hold together, sweetheart," he muttered, patting the console. The sky ahead lightened with the first blush of dawn. Somewhere west lay Allied lines, and hopefully someone who wouldn't shoot him down on sight. His fuel gauge hovered just above empty. The engine coughed once, then again. He dropped altitude, scanning for a clearing. There, a flat patch of earth beyond a cluster of trees. The FW-190 hit the ground hard, skidded through dirt, bounced, and came to rest in silence. Dust settled around him. Voices shouted in English, rifles aimed, soldiers surrounded the plane, eyes wide. Prescott raised his hands and laughed weakly. "Don't shoot, boys," he called out. "I'm on your side, I think." Somewhere in Allied-controlled Normandy, April 19th, 1944, 4:15 a.m. The Focke-Wulf sat in the middle of a muddy French field, its nose tilted slightly downward, exhaust still hissing in the cold dawn air. Soldiers surrounded it cautiously, rifles raised, circling as if the machine might suddenly spring back to life. The black cross painted on its fuselage was unmistakable. Inside, Lieutenant Robert Prescott sat with both hands raised, breathing heavily. His flight jacket was scorched, his face streaked with oil and sweat. He looked less like a pilot and more like a ghost pulled from the wreckage of war. The first voice that broke the silence came from a sergeant in a mud-stained uniform. "Who the hell are you?" he barked. "Lieutenant Robert Prescott, United States Army Air Forces," Prescott said between breaths. "Serial number 0-713592. Shot down east of Rouen." The men exchanged glances. One of them spat into the dirt. "And you're telling me you landed here? In that?" He jabbed his rifle toward the German fighter. Prescott gave a tired smile. "Long story, Sergeant." "Got a place to sit?" Within an hour, he was escorted to a nearby command post, a makeshift wooden hut at the edge of a small airstrip. Inside, maps covered the walls, cigarette smoke hung thick in the air, and the rumble of Allied bombers echoed faintly from the distance. Colonel James D. Hollingsworth, a tall, silver-haired officer with sharp eyes, sat behind a desk cluttered with documents and coffee mugs. Beside him, 2 intelligence officers took notes. They studied Prescott like a puzzle they weren't sure belonged in their box. "So?" Hollingsworth began, voice flat. "You're telling me you walked into a German airbase and flew out in one of their fighters?" "Yes, sir," Prescott replied, posture straight despite his exhaustion. "I didn't exactly plan it that way." The colonel leaned back, lighting a cigarette. "Son, I've heard a lot of tall tales in this war, but this one takes the cake. How do we know you're not a German spy who just forgot his lines?" Prescott smirked faintly. "Well, sir, if I were a spy, I'd have picked a softer landing." The officers chuckled quietly, but Hollingsworth didn't. He gestured to the stenographer. "All right, Lieutenant. From the top. Don't leave out a damn thing." Prescott exhaled, running a hand through his soot-blackened hair. "I was hit by flak at 23,000 feet east of Rouen. Engine caught fire. I bailed out. Landed in a field maybe 10 miles behind the lines. Hid until nightfall." He paused, his gaze unfocused as he relived the chaos. "Then I stumbled onto a Luftwaffe base. Couldn't believe it. Fighters everywhere, guards, lights, and one bird sitting there fueled and ready." "And you decided to steal it?" Hollingsworth said. "Decided to try," Prescott corrected. "Didn't have much of a choice. I figured if they didn't shoot me sneaking in, they'd shoot me sneaking out." He described the infiltration, slipping through the drainage trench, the stolen jacket, the clipboard, the way he whispered each German switch as if reciting a prayer. He even mimed the moment the engine roared to life, his hand jerking the imaginary throttle. The officers listened, spellbound. "And the takeoff?" one asked. "Loud," Prescott said with a wry grin. "Real loud. I think half the German army woke up. Tracers, flak, floodlights, you name it. But she flew like a dream, strong, steady. You wouldn't believe how smooth those radial engines run." When he finished, the room was silent except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Colonel Hollingsworth stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the captured Focke-Wulf resting on the airstrip. Dawn light gleamed off its battered fuselage. "You realize, Lieutenant, you just delivered us the first intact FW190A-8 we've ever had our hands on." Prescott blinked. "I did?" The colonel turned back, smiling for the first time. "You sure as hell did. Our engineers will tear that bird apart and learn everything she's got. You may have just given the RAF and the 8th Air Force a damn Christmas present." Prescott leaned back, finally allowing himself a breath of relief. "Glad to be of service, sir. Next time I'll try to bring 2. The officers laughed. Even Hollingsworth cracked a grin. By sunrise, word had spread through the camp. An American pilot had stolen a German fighter and flown it home. Mechanics crowded around the aircraft, snapping photographs and touching the bullet holes like they were relics. Prescott watched from the sidelines, wrapped in a blanket, sipping bitter coffee. His body ached, his nerves still wired from the night before. But for the first time since bailing out, he felt safe. A corporal approached, handing him a flight patch. "Souvenir, sir?" "From the boys. You earned it." Prescott smiled faintly, tucking it into his pocket. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the war raged on, but for one incredible night, one man had turned enemy steel into a ticket home. The Focke-Wulf 190 sat gleaming under the hangar lights, its once feared black crosses now replaced by Allied markings and stenciled test numbers. Engineers crowded around it daily, taking notes, dismantling panels, and measuring every inch of its design. What had once been a weapon of the Luftwaffe was now a trophy of American daring. Lieutenant Robert Bobby Prescott stood nearby, his arm in a sling, watching as a British test pilot climbed into the cockpit. The roar of the engine filled the air, familiar but no longer terrifying. The FW-190 had changed sides. A few weeks had passed since his impossible flight out of France. In that time, his story spread like wildfire through every Allied squadron from Normandy to London. The press didn't know the details, most of it was classified, but the rumour alone electrified the front lines. An American pilot had stolen a German fighter and brought it home. To the men still flying over Europe, it wasn't just a tale. It was proof that luck, skill, and defiance could still beat the odds. Inside the operations building, Colonel Hollingsworth met Prescott again, this time with a handshake and a grin. "Son," he said, "you just handed us the Luftwaffe's playbook. Turns out that bird climbs like a devil but stalls sharp in turns. Our boys are already learning how to outfight her." Prescott laughed softly. "So she's helping us win after all." "She is," Hollingsworth replied, "and so are you." For weeks afterward, Allied engineers and intelligence officers tested every system of the captured plane. They studied the engine's cooling design, its roll rate, and its distinctive firepower. By June, new combat manuals circulated among P-51 and Spitfire squadrons titled Tactics Against the FW-190. Much of that data came from the aircraft Prescott had risked everything to deliver. He never asked for fame, and none of it came immediately. His name remained buried in mission logs and intelligence memos, hidden behind phrases like "enemy aircraft recovered, pilot uninjured." But among pilots, the ones who faced the enemy every day, his legend grew quietly. At the mess halls and airfields, they'd tell the story between missions. The downed pilot who walked into a German airbase, started up a fighter, and flew it home. Some laughed in disbelief. Others nodded solemnly, knowing that in war, truth sometimes sounded like fiction. Months later, as D-Day drew near, Prescott received orders to return to duty. Before leaving, he walked one last time through the hangar, running his hand along the Focke-Wulf's smooth aluminum flank. "Thanks for the lift," he whispered. The engine tests echoed in the distance as he turned away, the sound fading into the roar of Allied bombers climbing toward France, the same sky he'd once fallen through. And so his impossible flight became part of the quiet history that wins wars, not through medals or headlines, but through courage, instinct, and one stolen set of wings that helped tip the balance of the skies.